Good evening, everyone. Tonight is Wednesday, February 24th, 2021. My, how time flies. I don't know about you, but I see victory on the horizon. For some reason or another, I'm making spiritual plans to return to church on Easter Sunday morning, one of the most important Christian holidays of all. Now, don't start calling around and making any announcements. I did not say that would happen, but I'm thinking what a wonderful time it would be to see my sisters and brothers in the Lord. Even if we have to wear masks and social distance, I am ready for at least 1 or 2 Sundays a month. We've been away for so long. We might need to do a drive-by and just wave at the church. Our last day in attendance was a year ago on Sunday, March 15th, 2020. This Easter will be on April the 4th, 2021. God has blessed all of us. I know we have had some hard times through this pandemic, but it could have been much worse. To God be the glory, great things He hath done. I'm so happy to have such wonderful people in my life. You guys have been so faithful and grounded during this time. Our pastors' inspiring Sunday morning messages, your wonderful spirit-driven services, prayer meetings, mission meetings, children church meetings are so heartwarming. Our fellowship with each other during this time has enhanced our love for one another. None of this would be possible without our younger technicians that told us we could do it. We have been blessed. Thank you for meeting the challenge through technology. Most of all, for being a part of our church family. I urge all of our members to tune in to Zoom when you get a chance. You will be blessed. Let's reach out and teach others how to connect with us. And to those of you who are timid, go on and find out how to work these machines. Remember, you can do this. Many of us did not know the first thing about broadcasting our services over the Wi-Fi. We had never done anything like this, but God. Nor were we aware of how to connect with one another when we started. But now, we know that God can do anything but fail. I think through the use of technology, the Church of God of Prophecy in Philadelphia, PA, has reached out to more people than we ever could have done by just being in our local churches. We may have to keep some of this up when we return to our local churches once again. God is everywhere. We can't limit Him to a building. We can't hide Him in a closet. He told us that He would be with us all the way. He only requires us to step out on His promises. Not our promises, but His promises. So when the church doors closed, what did God do for us? He opened up the airways for us. Won't He do it? Yes, He will. Praise the Lord. I want to thank all of our younger technicians again who have helped us old birds along this technical journey. Your support has been so important to the older ones. Many times we don't know what we have until we step back and take a look at all the great things that the Lord has provided for us. I'm asking prayers for all of the families throughout this world who have lost loved ones due to this COVID-19 pandemic. In addition to COVID, we need to pray for all of our people in the United States who have suffered loss through the freezing cold weather, in addition to COVID, that we have all encountered recently. The days of food and water shortages that they've had, the lack of adequate heat, and the inability to escape the perils of nature have caused many tragedies in this nation and rocked the lives of us all. I also think that our brothers and sisters who are suffering from lack of financial resources to accommodate any standard mode of living because of some leaders and officials who have never suffered hardship and don't relate to everyday life in poverty. Church, we have a lot to pray for. We need each other. Let's pray that the Lord will open their hearts and allow the Lord to deal with them. People are suffering. Tonight, we're going to start our Bible study in the book of Lamentations. There are so many new elements to this book that I hope with the Lord's help, I'll be able to relate to you what the Lord wants us to know about him and how to deal with sinners in a sinful world. I'm going to give you some background information first. Please pray for me as I start our lesson tonight. We're supposed to be doing Lamentations 1 and 2, but I think I'm going to do part of 3 as well. So pray my strength in the Lord, okay, as I pray for your attention. All right? It is very different from our other books in the Bible. I pulled this information that I'm going to talk to you about now, the Lamentations summaries and things. I pulled this from the Wi-Fi or the websites. Lamentations could be seen as events that are occurring in our nation right now in 2021. And we can see this. Lamentations is a funeral dirge, and that means a lament for the dead. You know, you don't have to be dead to be dead, especially if you don't know the Lord. That movies that have come out, dead men walking, that's possible. Keep that in mind. It is read the books of Lamentation, the book of Lamentation is read each year in the synagogues as the Jews commemorate the destruction of Solomon's temple in 586 BC. Jeremiah wrote the Lamentations as he wept bitterly over the city he had desperately tried to save. Some people say that Baruch, Jeremiah's scribe, also contributed to the writing of Lamentations. They say that because of the manner in which it was written, it's a book full of poems, and they call them acrostic poems. And I'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's a different melody that you're going to hear tonight, okay? The summary of this book goes as this. It consists of 5 separate poems. You remember the book of Job was full of poems. It was prose. And we could have actually had a play there because the characters were speaking and all of that. In Lamentations, we're not going to know precisely who is speaking, but whoever is speaking, it's my prayer that we can feel the emotions that they're feeling as we go along. It consists of 5 separate poems. In chapter 1, the city sits as a desolate, weeping widow, overcome with miseries. In chapter 2, these miseries are described in connection with national sins and acts of God. Chapter 3 speaks of hope for the people of God. The chastisement would only be for their good. A better day would dawn for them. Chapter 4 laments the ruin and desolation of the city and the temple, but traces it to the people's sins. Chapter 5 is a prayer that Zion's reproach may be taken away in the repentance and recovery of the people. So they're feeling like the wrath of God would be taken away as they repented and the people recovered. What does the word lamentation mean? Lamentation usually occurs when someone dies or a tragedy occurs. At a funeral, you could hardly hear the speaker above the walls of lamentations. For the Latin lamenta, meaning weeping or wailing, lamentation means more than just shedding a few tears. Lamentation is when grief pours out of you. And that comes from the dictionary. Structure of Lamentations. Very interesting. Lamentations consists of 5 distinct poems, which we said, corresponding to its 5 chapters. 2 of its defining characteristic features are the alphabetic acrostic and its Gina meter. But few English translations capture either of these. Even fewer attempt to capture both of them. The first 4 are written as acrostics. Chapters 1, 2, and 4 each have 22 verses, corresponding to the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. The first lines beginning with the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the second with the second letter, and so on. Chapter 3, however, has 66 verses, so that each letter begins 3 lines. So the first 3 lines in chapter 3 starts or begins with the Aleph, which is the Hebrew word, I guess, for A, and that's 4, 5, and 6 would be the Beth, and then 7, 8, and 9 would go into the others, okay? So they are alphabetically listed, but 3 lines represents each alphabet. The 5th poem, corresponding to the 5th chapter, is not an acrostic, but still has 22 lines. Although some claim that purpose or function of the acrostic form is unknown, it is frequently thought that a complete alphabetical order expresses a principle of completeness. From Aleph, the first letter, to Tav, the 22nd letter, it is the equivalent of the English equivalent would be from A to Z. Okay? So when you're dealing with writing poems and prose, and in English, in journalism, they will teach you those different methods of writing. And poetry can be beautiful, as we've seen this young lady over the air at the inauguration, at the, I think it was the Super Bowl game. The way that she spoke was art, and people loved it. And this, I think, if it were properly read, Lamentations would be awesome. I don't know what I can do with it, but we're going to read it anyway, okay? The theme of Lamentations combines the element of the Gina, which is the funeral dirge for the loss of the city, and the communal lament, pleading for the restoration of its people. It reflects the view traceable to Sumerian literature of 1,000 years earlier. But the destruction of the holy city was a punishment by God for the communal sin of its people. And if you would, let's go back to the other night when the president had the moment of silence for the 500,000 people who have passed away with COVID. That was a form of lamentation, with all of the candles representing the people. But what he was able to do, I think, was to take it to the individual people who were genuinely suffering this grief. And by that, just because we bury people, I see birthdays to people who have gone away, and I see how people are still holding their loved ones in their heart, and I do the same thing. It's been many years since my mother passed away, and I still feel like it was just last night when they took her away on the ambulance and took her to the hospital. I was one of those people that did not see my loved one pass away. When I got to the hospital, she had already passed. So when he said that, I felt that. And I think through this pandemic, people feel the loss. And there's a lot of other things that will go about with the Lamentations. If we don't pay attention to the evil that's going on out in this world, we're not going to be able to understand what it means when God comes back and with his wrath. We're going to say, people say that now, oh, God wouldn't do that to us. God wouldn't do this. He wouldn't do that. But just keep on being disobedient. Keep on living in your sin and keep on doing what you want to do rather than follow his commandments. And when the end comes, there will be no hope for us. Once the door of salvation and grace and mercy is closed, there will be no more chances. So I would encourage you that are not living for the Lord, do what you can to find out who he is and how wonderful it would be if you would let him in your hearts. Lamentations. I think about this. I want to read these about, it's the theme that I'm talking about now. And I told you, I think I read the first one. And it says, beginning with the reality of disaster. Disaster. We've had so many disasters in this current lifetime. Lamentations conclude with the bitter possibility that God may have finally rejected Israel. That's in chapter 5. Sufferers in the face of grief are not urged to a confidence in the goodness of God. We always accuse God. Why did God do this to me? Well, he does this to all of us, everybody. In fact, God is accountable for the disaster. The poet acknowledges that this suffering is just punishment. Still, God is held to have had choice over whether to act in this way and at this time. We know all the prophecies that were out there. People did not believe it. People believed the false prophets. They did not believe Jeremiah nor any other true prophet that was delivering God's message to the people. Repent. They refused. Hope arises from a recollection of God's past goodness. But although this justifies a cry to God to act in deliverance, there is no guarantee that he will. So there's no guarantee that this COVID will be lifted, but there is always hope. Repentance will not persuade God to be gracious, since he is free to give or withhold grace as he chooses. In the end, the possibility is that God has finally rejected his people and may not again deliver them. Nevertheless, it also affirms confidence that the mercies of Yahweh, the God of Israel, never end, but are new every morning. And we know the songs. I was sitting here trying to sing some songs a few minutes ago. My husband said, "Are you singing a solo?" And I was saying, well, a solo? He said, yeah, you need to sing solo so I can't hear you. I thought that was pretty humorous. But God's new mercies are new every morning that we wake up, every morning that we look, and we're able to see, we're able to have the use of our bodies. Those are God's mercies. Every day that you wake up, God is giving you a chance to make a choice. My big choice now is to accept discipline in my life as far as my health is concerned. And so many people are talking to me about that. But yet in my mind, I haven't put it into practice yet. But I'm praying that I will do that quick, fast, and in a hurry. Because so many times our behaviors forces the consequences upon us quicker than they would if we would just give in and do what is right. Lamentations 1 talks about the desolation of Jerusalem. You know what they did. I think I explained all of that last Wednesday to you guys. And it was horrible what they did. They shut up the walls. Nobody could go in and out of Jerusalem. No one could bring in new food or new vegetables or anything like that. And what food was within the camp, they had already eaten it. People were starving. People were doing ungodly things to each other, so in an effort to survive. And if you look out in the land now, watch and see what people are doing to survive. God is showing us so many undercurrents that have existed in our lives, and he's bringing it all to the light. I just pray that we don't turn our heads at the truth. We got to stop accepting lies and try to ream in on what is true, what is actually in existence. We can't dream up fairy tale things. We need to accept the truth of God. Verse 1 is going to tell us that there was a great nation one time that now sits in silence and rubble. Those in Jerusalem once trusted. Those in whom Jerusalem once trusted have become her enemies. Jerusalem will be referred to as a woman as well, okay? I want you, because that's going to be very prevalent. Jerusalem's afflictions was brought upon her because of the multitude of her transgressions. A lot of times we ask God, why did this happen? Why me? Just think about your past actions and your past behavior. And sometimes the answer to your calamities will be right in what we did before. Because the scripture says also, you will reap what you sow. The blame was placed upon Jerusalem for her calamities. It's unjust to blame God for our calamities. God gives us free will and free choice. Whatever we do, we choose to do that, just as God can choose to punish us. So when he does start punishing us, we should not get angry with him, but we should really sit at the master's feet and try to find out, what is it that I must do to correct what is causing me to be punished? What does a child do? What did I do, Mom? Why am I getting a whipping? Why? Well, they don't want to whip you no more. So what in the world are you going to do? You sit down and talk to them, and you put it in their heads, the principles and oracles of God. Verse 10, a stranger or a heathen was not allowed to enter the sanctuary and the Holy of Holies. The people had given all their money and treasures for bread. For these things I weep, thus the Lamentations of Jeremiah. We can always be certain of the righteousness of God in judgment. No matter what God does, he's right in what he's doing. The people died of starvation while searching for food. Lamentations 1. I think this is Jeremiah talking, but go with me. How doth the city sit solitary, that was full of people? How is she become as a widow? She that was great among the nations, and princess among the provinces, how is she become tributary? She weepeth sore in the night, and her tears are on her cheeks. Among all her lovers she hath none to comfort her. All her friends have dealt treacherously with her. They are become her enemies. You ever felt like that? Judah is gone into captivity because of affliction and because of great servitude. She dwelleth among the heathen. She findeth no rest. All her persecutors overtook her between the straits. The ways of Zion do mourn, because none come to the solemn feast. All her gates are desolate. Her priests sigh. Her virgins are afflicted, and she is in bitterness. Her adversaries are the chief. Her enemies prosper. For the Lord hath afflicted her, for the multitude of her transgressions. Her children are gone into captivity before the enemy. And from the daughter of Zion, all her beauty is departed. Her princes are become like harts that find no pasture, and they are gone without strength before the pursuer. Jerusalem remembered in the days of her affliction and of her miseries all her pleasant things that she had in the days of old. When her people fell in the hand of the enemy, and none did help her, the adversaries saw her, and did mock at her Sabbaths. Jerusalem hath grievously sinned, therefore she is removed. All that honored her despise her, because they have seen her nakedness. Yea, she sigheth, and turneth backward. Her filthiness is in her skirts. She remembered not her last end. Therefore she came down wonderfully. She had no comforter. O Lord, behold my affliction, for the enemy hath magnified himself. The adversary hath spread out his hand upon all her pleasant things. For she hath seen that the heathen entered into her sanctuary, whom thou didst command that they should not enter into thy congregation. All her people sigh. They seek bread. They have given their pleasant things for meat, to relieve the soul. See, O Lord, and consider, for I am become vile. Is it nothing to you, all ye that pass by? Behold, and see if there be any sorrow like unto my sorrow, which is done unto me, wherewith the Lord hath afflicted me in the day of his fierce anger. From above hath he sent fire into my bones, and it prevaileth against them. He hath spread a net for my feet. He hath turned me back. He hath made me desolate and faint all the day. The yoke of my transgressions is bound by his hand. They are wreathed and come up upon my neck. He hath made my strength to fall. The Lord hath delivered me into their hands, for whom I am not able to rise up. The Lord hath trodden under foot all my mighty men in the midst of me. He hath called an assembly against me to crush my young men. The Lord hath trodden the virgin, the daughter of Judah, as in a winepress. For these things I weep. Mine eye runneth down with water, because the Comforter that should relieve my soul is far from me. My children are desolate, because the enemy prevailed. Zion spreadeth forth her hands, and there is none to comfort her. The Lord hath commanded concerning Jacob that his adversaries should be round about him. Jerusalem is as a menstruous woman among them. The Lord is righteous, for I have rebelled against his commandment. Hear, I pray you, all people, and behold my sorrow. My virgins and my young men are gone into captivity. I called for my lovers, but they deceived me. My priests and mine elders gave up the ghost in the city while they sought their meat to relieve their souls. Behold, O Lord, for I am in distress. My bowels are troubled. Mine heart is turned within me, for I have grievously rebelled. Abroad the sword bereaveth. At home there is death. They have heard that I sigh. There is none to comfort me. All my enemies have heard of my trouble. They are glad that thou hast done it. Thou wilt bring the day that thou hast called, and they shall be like unto me. Let all their wickedness come before thee, and do unto them as thou hast done unto me, for all my transgressions. For my sighs are many, and my heart is faint. That is the end of Lamentations 1. Lamentations 2. Jeremiah laments over Jerusalem's misery. He reflects on the awesome scene of the destruction of Jerusalem by the Babylonian army. Jerusalem's beauty had departed. God was faithful to his warnings. These verses are a call to intercessory prayer. The people had not been desperate enough to seek God with their whole heart. God was viewed as an enemy of Jerusalem. The Lord, as Jerusalem's enemy, the Lord destroys his own tabernacle. A city reacts to the judgment of God. The defenses of the city react. The people of the city react. The prophet reacts. Longing to comfort a forsaken city, false prophets cannot comfort Jerusalem. Friends and foes cannot comfort Jerusalem. God's purpose in the day of the Lord's anger, the judgment of Jerusalem as what God purposed. The prayer of Jerusalem's enemy, the agony of the perishing city. Lamentations 2. How had the Lord covered the daughter of Zion with a cloud in his anger, and cast down from heaven unto earth the beauty of Israel, and remember not his footstool in the day of his anger. The Lord hath swallowed up all the inhabitants of Jacob, and hath not pitied. He had thrown down in his wrath the strongholds of the daughter of Judah. He hath brought them down to the ground. He hath polluted the kingdom and the princes thereof. He hath cut off in his fierce anger all the horn of Israel. He hath drawn back his right hand from before the enemy, and he burned against Jacob like a flaming fire, which devoureth round about. He hath bent his bow like an enemy. He stood with his right hand as an adversary, and slew all that were pleasant to the eye in the tabernacle of the daughter of Zion. He poured out his fury like fire. The Lord was as an enemy. He hath swallowed up Israel. He hath swallowed up all her palaces. He hath destroyed his strongholds, and hath increased in the daughter of Judah mourning and lamentation. And he hath violently taken away his tabernacle, as if it were of a garden. He hath destroyed his places of the assembly. The Lord hath caused the solemn feast and Sabbaths to be forgotten in Zion, and hath despised in the indignation of his anger the king and the priest. The Lord hath cast off his altar. He hath abhorred his sanctuary. He hath given up into the hand of the enemy the walls of her palaces. They have made a noise in the house of the Lord as in the day of a solemn feast. The Lord hath purposed to destroy the wall of the daughter of Zion. He hath stretched out a line. He hath not withdrawn his hand from destroying. Therefore he made the rampart and the wall to lament. They languished together. Her gates are sunk into the ground. He hath destroyed and broken her bars. Her king and her princes are among the Gentiles. The law is no more. Her prophets also find no vision from the Lord. The elders of the daughters of Zion sit upon the ground and keep silence. They have cast up dust upon their heads. They have girded themselves with sackcloth. The virgins of Jerusalem hang down their heads to the ground. Mine eyes do fail with tears. My bowels are troubled. My liver is poured upon the earth for the destruction of the daughter of my people, because the children and the suckling swoon in the streets of the city. They say to their mothers, where is corn and wine? When they swooned as the wounded in the streets of the city, when their soul was poured out into their mother's bosom. What things shall I take to witness for thee? What things shall I liken to thee, O daughter of Jerusalem? What shall I equal to thee, that I may comfort thee, O virgin daughter of Zion? For thy breach is great like the sea. Who can heal thee? Thy prophets have seen vain and foolish things for thee, and they have not discovered thine iniquity to turn away thy captivity, but have seen for thee false burdens and causes of banishment. All that pass by clap their hands at thee. They hiss and wag their head at the daughter of Jerusalem, saying, is this the city that being called the perfection of beauty, the joy of the whole earth? All thine enemies have opened their mouth against thee. They hiss and gnash their teeth. They say, we have swallowed her up. Certainly, this is the day that we looked for. We have found, we have seen it. The Lord hath done that which he had devised. He hath fulfilled his word that he had commanded in the days of old. He hath thrown down and hath not pitied, and he hath caused thine enemy to rejoice over thee. He hath set up a horn of thine adversaries. Their heart cried unto the Lord, O wall of the daughter of Zion, let tears run down like a river day and night. Give thyself no rest. Let not the apple of thine eye cease. Arise, cry out in the night. In the beginning of the watches, pour out thine heart like water before the face of the Lord. Lift up thy hands toward him for the life of thy young children that faint for hunger in the top of every street. Behold, O Lord, and consider to whom thou hast done this. Shall the women eat their fruit and children of a span long? Shall the priest and the prophet be slain in the sanctuary of the Lord? The young and the old lie on the ground in the streets. My virgins and my young men are fallen by the sword. Thou hast slain them in the day of thine anger. Thou hast killed and not pitied. Thou hast called as in a solemn day my terrors round about, so that in the day of the Lord's anger none escaped nor remained. Those that I have swaddled and brought up hath mine enemy consumed. That's the end of Lamentations 2. In Lamentations 3, And I'm only going to read half of that tonight. There are 66 verses in that, so I will only do 33. Jeremiah shares in his nation's afflictions. Jeremiah related to his depth of despair and hopelessness over his calamities. Hopelessness always leads to depression. Did you know that? Jeremiah was at one of the lowest points of his life. Jeremiah was the only prophet that I know of that preached for over 46 years and not one person got saved. That's not a good testament to your ministry. But the faithfulness that he bestowed upon the Lord to the people, the compassion that he had for the people, never stopped. Even though he went through feelings of depression. He felt low. He felt down. Sometimes you don't feel like going any further. Sometimes you feel like, what is the use? Nobody cares about me. Nobody wants to hear what I've got to say. What is the use? But through it all, Jeremiah would pick himself up and say, I've got to go through this. I've got to obey the Lord. And that's what he did. All these years, he suffered, but he continued to have faith in God. It says, there is a dramatic change as Jeremiah adjusts his thinking. We can think ourselves into hopelessness and despair, or by the renewing of our mind, we can come into a whole new state of consciousness of God to attain victory and hope. The fact that I wake up each morning is proof of God's mercy, compassion, and faithfulness. The Lord is all I need. This is a prophecy of Jesus Christ. The forsaking of the people by God will not last forever. It doesn't please God to have to afflict us. Anytime we rebel against God, we make it hard on ourselves because God is faithful and loves us. He will chasten us. And this is by Pastor Chuck. Another one of the ministers that I get information from is David Guzik. Great is your faithfulness is chapter 3. The third poem is significantly different in structure from the others, being made up of single lines grouped into threes and commencing with the same consonant of the Hebrew alphabet. In the Hebrew Bible, the first 3 verses all start with Aleph, the second 3 verses with Beth, and so forth and so on. In this chapter, there was opposition by the Lord. The man afflicted by the Lord. God an adversary in many ways. There was rising hope in God's help. This is where Jeremiah's thinking began to change. A lot of us need to change our way of thinking too. The sinking soul, new mercies from a faithful God, God's goodness to the seeking soul, hope for the silent soul, and the goodness of God even in his justice. Next week, I will finish chapter 3, and we will continue with chapters 4 and 5, and hopefully we'll be able to conclude Lamentations. But I'm going to read Lamentations 3, 1 through 33 now, okay? I am, and every 3 verses, I want you to hear the change and the inflection in what I'm saying. I am the man that hath seen affliction by the rod of his wrath. He hath led me and brought me into darkness, but not into light. That's how Christians feel sometimes. It's dark all around me and I can't find any help. Surely against me is he turned. He turneth his hand against me all the day. Now, that sounds like a depressed person to me. 4, 5, and 6. My flesh and my skin hath he made old. He hath broken my bones. He hath builded against me. and compassed me with gall and travail. He hath set me in dark places, as they that be dead of old. I'm so depressed now, I just feel like an old person and want to sit in the corner and go somewhere and just be by myself. 7, 8, and 9. He hath hedged me about that I cannot get out. He hath made my chain heavy. Also, when I cry and shout, he shutteth out my prayer. He hath enclosed my ways with hewn stone. He hath made my paths crooked. Sometimes when you're calling out to the Lord, it seems like it goes to the ceiling and it bounces back, doesn't it? Keep praying. It'll get through. Something's wrong with your heart. You got to keep praying until you feel it. Verses 10, 11, and 12. He was unto me as a bear lying in wait, and as a lion in secret places. That's how awesome the feelings were when someone you love is against you. It's like it's like a bear lying in wait, or a lion in secret places. He hath turned aside my ways and pulled me in pieces. He hath made me desolate. He hath bent his bow and set me as a mark for the arrow. Now, when you get into a condition where you think God is against you, and he's so far against you, he got his bow out and he's going to get you every time you walk out the door, you need to fall on your knees and pray until you can get those prayers through the ceiling, okay? 13, 14, and 15, he hath caused the arrows of his quiver to enter into my reins. I was a derision to all my people, and their song all the day. He hath filled me with bitterness. He hath made me drunken with wormwood. You know, we can feel like sometimes that God was your enemy, and you get bitter and you start saying, oh, there is no God. There's this and there's that. I think of that Ron, I think his name is Reagan, Ron Reagan Jr. I'm an atheist, and I belong with the agnostics and Freedom Foundation for something of religion, and I know there's a hell and I'm not afraid of it. I flinch every time I hear him say that. And the commercial is so fast you can't jump up and turn the TV off. But I feel for him and I pray for him. It says here in 16, after he filled me with bitterness, made me drunken with wormwood, he hath also broken my teeth with gravel stones. He hath covered me with ashes. And thou hast removed my soul from far off from peace. I forget prosperity. I forgot when I had everything I needed. I'm so far down in the valley. And I said, my strength and my hope is perished from the Lord. Remembering mine affliction and my misery, the wormwood and the gall, I just couldn't get none of that out of my mind. My soul hath them still in remembrance, and is humbled in me. Sometimes I have to think about it, to the point that now I realize what I must do to come out of this situation. This I recall to my mind, therefore I have hope. So he starts remembering the things that God did for him in the past. And he starts remembering how wonderful it was to serve him. And regardless of what's going on around him, he says in verse 21, I brought it all to my memory. I was reminded of all this. I recalled all of this. And now I have hope. 22. It is of the Lord's mercies that we are not consumed. Don't you know, as bad as the crimes are down in this earth today, we are living on the mercies of God. You know why? Verse 22, part B. Because his compassions fail not. 23. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. You know that great is thy faithfulness song, it came from that verse. Great is his faithfulness to us. There's no reason we should rebel against God. The Lord is my portion, saith my soul. Therefore will I hope in him. The Lord is good unto them that wait for him, to the soul that seeketh him. You can't just wait for God. You got to seek God. It is good that a man should both hope and quietly wait for the salvation of the Lord. It is good for a man that he bear the yoke in his youth. He sitteth alone and keepeth silence, because he hath borne it upon him. He putteth his mouth in the dust. If so be, there may be hope. He's looking for hope now. But what you got to do, you got to wait for him and you got to seek him. Not only seek him, but seek the salvation of the Lord. Verse 30. He giveth his cheek to him that smiteth him. He is filled full with reproach. For the Lord will not cast off forever. But though he cause grief, yet will he have compassion, according to the multitude of his mercies. For he doth not afflict willingly, nor grieve the children of men. Any correction or reproof that God does to any of us, he doesn't do it willingly. He doesn't want to do it. He doesn't want to grieve us. He wants to make us whole. Give God a chance. This is verse 33, and that's the end of our lessons for tonight. But God's message to all of us is the same thing I said it was last week. But as he which hath called you is holy, be ye holy in all manner of conversation. Because it is written, be ye holy, for I am holy. Next week we're going to finish our new book of Lamentations. I pray for love, honor, truth, and respect to become our norm as we move forward in the liberty of Christ. I pray for justice, equality, and compassion, that it be upon all of God's children. I pray for our democracy and the healing of our grieving and hurting nation. I thank God for his grace and his mercies on us as he continues to witness such ungodliness in this world today. Good night, everyone. To those of you who stayed with me, thank you very much. And I hope to see you next week.